I welcome you to Microsoft Azure Pakistan Community June 2023 meetup, and I will start by uh, going through some of the housekeeping rules. We plan to meet up online at least once a month on Saturdays. The online meetings are organized using Skype, and the online meeting would be recorded, and later these recordings would be uploaded to Microsoft Azure Pakistan Community YouTube channel. And I would request you all to please mute yourself during the meetings. The meetup time would be around 1 hour to 1 hour and 30 minutes, depending upon the time needed by the respective speaker. And there would be 10-15 minutes for Q&A session in the end. And I would urge you all to please write your questions in the chat window. Microsoft Azure Pakistan community is a part of Azure Tech Group, so we follow the code of conduct. And our code of conduct is that you should be friendly and welcoming. You should be patient. Be thoughtful in how you communicate in person and online. Be respectful and inclusive. Be open and curious. And reach out to the organizers if you need anything. Today, I have the honor of welcoming Jezreel, who will be telling us about how to build and deploy your first Azure Static Web Apps and Angular with Angular and Azure Functions. Azure Static Web Apps is a service that can automatically build and deploy full stack web apps to Microsoft Azure from a code repository. Static web apps are commonly built using libraries and web frameworks like Angular, React, uh, Svelte, Vue, and Blazor, whereas server-side rendering isn't required. These apps include HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and image assets that make up the application. With traditional web servers, these assets are served from a single server alongside any required endpoints. In this session, we will explore some of the built-in features of Azure Static Web Apps, and Jezreel will show you how to build your first Azure Static Web Application using Angular, Azure Frontend framework, and Azure Functions from your Backend API, and then deploy it on using Azure DevOps. And this session will be delivered by Jezreel, and he is a Microsoft Azure MVP and a full stack developer with many years of experience building web applications using the latest technologies. He's a passionate learner and he loves to share his knowledge. So I welcome you, Jazreel, to Microsoft Azure Pakistan Community Forum, and you can please start with sharing your screen and going along with your session.
Awesome. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. I am starting to share my screen now. Let me know once you can guys see it.
Yeah, I can see your screen now.
Then let me just quickly fix my Zoom. Yeah. All right. So before I begin, if you want to download the source code, I already have this uploaded earlier or made some updates on it earlier. You can just go to my GitHub repo, which is just Maghuyop, and then you can grab this one, SWA Weather app using Angular 16. There's right now there's 3 branches in it. So one is basically a bare Angular. The main branch is only contains the bare Angular application, and then the SWA AZ Func Weather API is a branch where I added Azure Function on top of the Angular application using static web apps, and then the release production, I added some config for the production environment. So again, feel free to download it, but I might also do some updates on it later today. But yeah, so just a couple of expectations. I'm not a UI UX designer. I won't be able to show you a fancy application. A simple web app should be enough for our agenda for today. And I'm also not a DevOps engineer. So just to set some expectations. So most of the things that I'll be showing you today are a result of my trial and error and how to build and deploy static web apps with Azure DevOps. So I'm this guy, just the guy who sits on in front of my computer and just writes code. So let's set the bar very low for this one, okay? And yeah, as I mentioned, I'll be showing you how to build your first static web apps using Angular and Azure Function. Although I won't be going deep into what is Angular, what is Azure Function, how you start creating Angular application, how you start creating Azure Function. I'll be focusing more on the features of static web apps. All right. So first, I guess Zero already mentioned it during his introduction about um, Azure Static Web Apps. But again, this is an Azure's app services that allows you to automatically build and deploy full stack web app to Azure from a code repository. It have many built-in features designed to make our development life easier, especially for someone like me who really isn't that knowledgeable in DevOps. So, but as much as possible, I want to use pipelines, actions to deploy my code. So yeah, static web apps really fits my needs um, most of the time, because I usually do Angular. And then, yeah, like I said, I want to also do or take advantage of GitHub Actions or pipelines, Azure pipelines to do CI/CD. So, Static Web Apps was first announced in preview in May of 2020, if I remember correctly, and it became generally available around May 2021. So it has first class um, GitHub and Azure DevOps integration, where repository changes, triggers, builds, and deploys. But at the same time, it also supports other version control system. So there's just a little bit different. There's just some extra thing you need to do if you want to deploy it in other version control system other than GitHub or Azure DevOps. And hopefully I'll have time later to show it to you. But yeah, so again, this is commonly built using libraries for front-end frameworks like React, Angular, Svelte, Vue, Blazor, where server-side rendering is not required. Although for some cases, there's just um, specific build commands in order for you to do server-side rendering. I'll show you the link later on those commands. You can also publish sites like Gatsby, Hugo, ViewPress, I believe, which basically just includes, or all of these apps are basically just includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and image assets that makes up the application, or I think other people call it now as Jamstack, which is JavaScript API and markup. Yeah, so I'm gonna show you or discuss some of the key features of static web apps. One is web hosting for static content like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and yeah, again, images. It has integrated API support provided by Azure Functions with the option to link an existing Azure Functions, container apps, web apps, and I forgot the other one. But in order for you to do that, um, you have to be on the standard pricing plan. So for the free pricing plan, you're only allowed to use Azure Function. Um, And then again, if you're on a standard plan, if you have an existing API in other application that you are currently using, you can link it to your static web apps, and then it should work seamlessly. And then for Azure Function, it supports Node.js, .NET Core, .NET 6, and Python. And then CDN, it's globally distributed static content, putting content closer to your users, so it makes your content load faster. For assets with file extension of popular text formats such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, Azure Static Web Apps automatically serve them with gzip or broadly compressed versions of your static asset if the client supports it. And one of my favorite is, of course, the free SL certificate, which are automatically renewed, so you don't have to worry about it. I like SL because even though I'm majority of the time I only use it for like personal projects, it's still good to have it and not use another third party and being constantly renewed it manually. So at least with this one, it's free and you can it's automatically renewed for you. So don't need to worry about it. Then the other one is custom domain. So for free pricing plan, you can add 2 custom domains per app. And then for the standard pricing plan, you can add 5 custom domain per application. So later we'll see, or I'll show you the current pricing plan, and let's see some of the details if it's accurate. Last is authentication. So by default, you have access to pre-configured providers such as Azure Active Directory, GitHub, Twitter, and I believe they also mentioned Google, but I haven't tested out yet. But yeah, it has pre-configured auth providers, and with standard plan, it allows you to configure a custom provider that supports OpenID Connect. So Auth0, if you have a custom identity server, then that should be supported as well. So generated staging version. So stage versions of your application are currently accessible publicly by their URL. So even if your, let's say for example, GitHub repository is private, be careful when you publish sensitive data to stage version, as access to pre-production environment is not restricted. So, and also another thing to note is pre-production environments are not geo-distributed, so it doesn't have the same performance as your production site. What else? The good thing, I guess, with now, because they recently released password protected pages, so you can configure it later on Azure portal. So even though your pre-production or your staging environments are public, you can enable the password protect. So when they go to that URL, then they will be prompted to enter a password. Again, I'll try to show that later as well. And the staging environments are created automatically for you once you send a pull request. So whenever you send a pull request, it creates an instance for you with a unique URL, which you can view and then see the actual changes on that staging environment, play around with it before you actually approve the pull request. So that's good. So like in this, on my screen right now, someone, so this is the master branch, and then someone sent a pull request, and then it automatically created an instance with this unique link that I can go to. So, and then it says also here that this pull request is under the branch staging. So, going to the pricing plans. For free plan, you can only have, I believe, I could be wrong, 10 apps per Azure subscription if you're on free, and then of course for the standard plan, it's unlimited as long as you pay for it. The bandwidth for free plan, if your site exceeds the usage quota, which is 100 GB per subscription, Azure will not be serving your site. So that's the downside. But with standard, once you exceed the quota, you'll just get price on top of it, or build on top of it. We can actually go here, I guess. Yeah, so it's per GB as you reach your limit. Custom domain, yeah, 2 per app, then 5 per app for standard. SSL certificates, both are free. Service-defined authentication, and then custom authentication, as I mentioned, for free, you can't use your custom authentication, but for standard, you can bring your own custom authentication if you have created one. Then storage size, and then Azure Function, you only can do the managed one, which is included in your static web apps. For the standard plan, you can bring your own. So like I mentioned, if you already have an existing Azure Function web app container apps that you have existed before, you can link it to your static web apps. And then, yeah, enterprise grade Edge, you get billed $17 per month. Enables your page to load faster, enhance security, and optimizes your entire application. And once you migrated from free to standard plan, you can just go to Azure portal and enable it. You don't have to do anything once you enable enterprise grade Edge. So that's good. So what's new? At least from the last time I've seen, new API options. So before they only, when they release it to public, they only support Azure Functions. So like I mentioned, now it has container apps, web apps, yeah, Azure Function. And then Static Web App CLI. And then the Azure DevOps supports improvement. So before, they only have first-class support with GitHub. And then you can still use Azure DevOps when they initially released it, but you have to manually copy the token and then use it in your Azure pipeline, which you will do now for other source control if it's not GitHub or Azure DevOps. But now it's seamless as well. You can just use Azure portal, and then it will automatically do the Azure pipeline for you. And then one thing that I like that was recently added was the password protect. So the tooling or the things that you need to build an Azure Static Web Apps is your Azure Functions, of course. The Azure Static Web Apps extension in your VS Code. And then you can use the Azure Core Tool, Azure Function Core Tool version 4. But I'm not sure if you should use it because when I was doing this demo, I've encountered a lot of like issues, and some of them are still open on GitHub. and it's specifically only for, I'm referring to issues specifically to static web apps with Azure Function v4. So if you have v3, try to build static web apps with that and see if you encounter any issues. Because before I was using just v3, I didn't encounter an issue. And then when I was building the demo for this talk, I decided to upgrade to version 4, and then a lot of issue came up. But I'll show you some workaround in order for you to still continue developing with version 4. And then I'll also try to share you the open issues on GitHub later, so you can also take a look at it and be updated if there is any fixes available. Then another thing is the Azure Static Web App CLI. So you have to install it globally. It allows you to run your static web apps locally, including the API and authentication emulator, so you can fully develop and run your apps locally. And I think you only need Node.js to run it, so that's the only dependency. And then once you have it installed, you can do the SWA start. And then normally, if you're using Angular application, when you do ng build, the application gets deployed to usually the dist folder and then the name of your application. So in this case, for example, it's Angular app. And then you can also specify the folder location of your API. So the default is just API. And then, yeah, I guess I'll just show you the demo. I have here a very, very basic Angular application. So let me just show you what it looks like for now. Oops. Yeah, so this is what it looks like for now. And then I'm going to show you, or let me just, I guess, so I have here working files. So first I'll show you the Node.js. So right now, all the APIs are in a separate project. So I have the Angular folder separately. I have the Azure Function API separately, and then I have this user info separately. All right, so I'll just open them up for now. And this is my working demo already. But later on, I'm just gonna copy some of it so you can show how you can convert your existing Angular application into static web apps. All right, so let me open this one. So this one is the Node application. Yeah, Node application. So I'm just gonna do Node app.js. And one thing to note is that you can only link one API. You can't link two, right? So it's either I link the Node API or I link the Azure function. That's it. But for this local demo, we can link both. Again, right now they're running separately. So I'm building Azure Function. It should run on port 7071. And then, where are you running? What's this? Oh, this is the Azure Function. And then the Node.js application is running on port 3000. So basically, the main purpose of this this node is to show you how you can get the user details once you perform the authentication and authorization later. Because once you get authenticated, all of your request header will include this XMS client principal, which you can decode with base64, and you can grab this user details from it. Right? So The Azure function is done building and it's running. Then I'm going to show you my environment profile for Angular. Sorry. So I have here the API user weather, and then I have the external one, which is the API weather. So the Azure function basically just pulls data from here as well. So if we go to, so remember it's API weather API. If I go to Azure function, let's look at the, so I just have the API URL and keys. I have the API URL and keys here. You can also, of course, create your own API keys in API weather API. So I'm just grabbing them here. And then, of course, I'm using the API URL and key to do a GET request. Yeah, I'm doing a GET request just to get the current weather for the city that I'll be passing on to the endpoint. So, but yeah, the idea is I'm just also using this external API. I just have it here for the Azure function specifically. But yeah, now if I refresh this, yeah. So the external API is being used down here, which is the forecast for, wait, this is today, tomorrow, and on Monday. So the external API uses, I'm using the external API for this one. And then for this one, this is coming from the Azure function. So if I go to the network, I can see there's only 3 requests. This is the external API, and it's return the weather forecast for the next 3 days. And then the current one, this is coming from the Azure function, 7071. And then I have here the user info with response to stranger because the header isn't found. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, now what I'll do is I'll basically just copy paste the Azure function into this Angular application. So I can build this into a static web app. So what I'll do, since I have the static web apps extension, I'll just go Control Shift P, and then I'm gonna show you all the available. Yeah, you can see here, you can create app, you can delete static web apps, you can create web apps, and then, but for my needs right now, since I already have an existing Angular application, I'm just gonna create a HTTP function. And I'm just gonna do exactly the same thing as what the Azure function is doing so that I can close it. And that means I'll be using C#. Wait, I'm gonna show you, yeah. So these are the currently supported languages for static web apps Azure function. Then I'm just gonna copy the name of this file. And then also the namespace so that I can copy the entire thing. All right. Yeah, let's override it. And then as you can see, it now created an API folder for me. And then it has all um, the project files, the get weather HTTP trigger class. So since this is basically just identical, I'm just gonna copy this into this one. And then what else? just gonna copy the models as well because I have here created some models for the payload and then response. So I'm just gonna show you what it looks like if you're curious. But yeah, that's basically it. So I'm gonna copy it over, to my Azure function in my Angular. Uh, yeah, copy the folder, I have everything here. And then if I build this one, so for now, I'm gonna start my Angular application. Then let's wait for this to build. And since I've already copied that Azure function, I don't need this one anymore running. I'm just gonna close this one as well. And close this. Awesome. So now what I'll do is, where's my, yeah, so I'm gonna show you what I'll do is I'll build my, wait, do I have I'll have to add some of the fixes that I did. So just quickly, yeah. The Angular CLI, not sure if it was broken or what, but when I created the project Angular, it didn't include the environment files. I've actually manually created these ones, but by default, if you're an Angular developer, it should be automatically available for you. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with my version 16. But yeah, just copy it so that if I build in development or production, the config just switch over. And yeah, and then now I'm gonna do ng build. So while that is building, I'm gonna show you what the two service I have. So again, this service, the current weather points to the Azure function. So as you can see, it's API weather. If I go to my environment files, it's the API weather 7071. And then the other one is the external weather, which is the actual API, weather API. Then I'm going to show you the problem with version 4. Yeah, once this is done building, you should be able to see it. Yeah, you're right. I'm just going to copy this over to production as well because the settings should be identical in terms of the schema, not the values. But since I'm going to be using the same API and the API key for this development and production, then I'm just going to copy it. At least that shows that my environment for the production is working. So yeah, now it's done building. It has now the SWA weather app in G16. So now what I'll do is I'll run the static web apps build script. So I'll run this. Then I'm just gonna zoom in case you're not seeing it. I'll zoom one more time. Okay, so this should be close enough. All right, so it's just SWA start and then the location of your Angular application, the build folder, and then the location of your API. So at least when I tried it 2 days ago, it's showing some error. It could not connect to it could not connect to the Azure Function one. So this should show us some error. Then I'm gonna share you some links on some of the ongoing issue so that you guys are also up to date on why this is going on while that's building. So if you go to Static Web App CLI issue 663, you should see some of the people having issue there. And then this one is also related to it. Oh, this one is the workaround. So if you go to this site, it will tell you how to get around it. I did try this one. So basically, he installed concurrently and did some scripts, command scripts, then created another folder inside SRC, and then created another script command there that is being called here. So this didn't work for me, at least, but some of the people who's in here, they said it worked for them. I'll show you what worked for me. So this is the Node.js. I'm just gonna, right, so this one didn't work, right? What worked for me was to explicitly say, add, so I'm just gonna add swa cli.config.json. So I just basically said here that I want the host to be 127.0.0.1 instead of localhost. And then still, I said that the application is in this, and then the API location is still in the API. So now I'll just have to run swa start. Oops, didn't save this one. So yeah, you see now it picks up the config that I have. So it's now using 127.0.0.1. And then yeah, my app is running in 4280. Let's go to localhost 4280. I have an error, probably the keys. Yeah, I forgot to add the keys. Let me just add it. There. Then let me close this one, clear, and then do a swa start again. If I refresh, hopefully it works. Yeah, so now it works. So it says 24.7 Celsius in Norway. Because in my app component, yeah, I'm passing this city, which is hard coded as Oslo. Of course, I can add a text box, but yeah, just hard coding it for now. And then one thing that you should notice is in the network for the current, it says HTTP 4280 slash API whether current. And it's not localhost 7071 as you might have expect, because static web apps runs you configures a proxy when you run it. So, and then it doesn't, you don't also have to necessarily add a course config. So as you can see, there were no course issue. And then, yeah. So if we go back to the environment files for the production build, you can see that the weather is empty because in here, this is the production. So for production, weather is empty. And then for local ng serve, it's using the 7071. Yeah. So I'm just appending the URL here. So if it's empty, then it's going to be whatever my static web apps URL is, which is 4280 in port 4280. And then, yeah, so it's like this right now because in production, weather's empty. Yeah. So that's one of the magic going on with static web apps. So now I'm ready to build this or deploy in Azure. Um, let me just create, I guess, what branch am I? I'm in main branch. This is demo production. Production. And then I think I have one issue with app settings. Let's see if it still works again. Refresh. Yeah, still works. So yeah, I'm gonna start deploying this one. Just gonna stop it, clear, and then I'm gonna go to my Azure DevOps. I already have a working version, but we'll have to create a new one for this. So let's say this weather app demo. I'll create this one. And it's gonna add this. All right. If I refresh this, should be, yeah, so I have the release demo production available. So now what I'll do is in my Azure portal, I'll start creating a new static web apps. Azure Static Web Apps or Static Web App. Just gonna choose this one. And then I'm gonna name this weather app, Pakistan Easy Demo. And then again, as I mentioned, um, you have the option to choose between GitHub or Azure DevOps. So if you're not logged in yet, of course you have to log in and then it will grab your repository or your organization on GitHub. And then example this. And then of course you have your branch that you wanted to build from. And then you have a list of available presets or with frameworks and then static site generators. And then of course you have custom. I normally use custom for just vanilla JavaScript, but for our use case, we'll be using Angular. Right, so I'm gonna go back here since we're doing it in Azure DevOps. I'm gonna choose this organization, and I'm gonna choose this project. Then I should see two repository, and this is the new one that I just created. And then we'll be using the production branch. And for framework, it will be using Angular. So the application will be / by default. The Azure function will be API. And I'm just gonna go back here so that I don't misspelled anything. So I'm just gonna copy this and paste it here. Basically where your build file can be found. And create. Go to resource. And then we go to the environments. You can see here in the environments, it's still building. So if I go back to the Azure DevOps and go to pipeline, I should see this one building. Hopefully it builds. Seems like it's going to build. And then, yeah, so while that is still building, I'm gonna show you some of the forgot. Yeah. So here, if you go to this URL in the official documentation of Microsoft, if you go to the build configuration, you can see some build commands that you can override. Of course, we've already seen the application when we created the Azure Static Web Apps in Azure Portal, the API location, the output location. For the build command, by default, Static Web Apps will run the npm run build or npm run Azure commands. So if you don't specify anything, it will just run the default. As you can see here, which it's doing its thing. It's running the ng build, npm run build. If you want to override it, you just, let me go to this. I'm gonna clear and then I'm just gonna pull the latest, because when we link the repository from Azure portal, it created as a YAML file for the build pipeline. So I'm just gonna pull that. You can see here it was generated. So if I open it up, you can see here I'm just gonna close this. The task for static web apps, and of course the settings that we provided when we created the static web apps in Azure. And as I mentioned, if you want to override some stuff, you can just add it here. npm run build pre-render. For example, you're running server-side rendering with Angular Universal. You can do that. So I'm just gonna remove this because I don't need that. Then I'm gonna share you the link for the build commands for different frameworks. If you go again to the official documentation of Azure Static Web Apps, you should see some of the custom build command. So for example, as I mentioned, if you're using Angular Universal for server-side rendering, you can override the build command with npm run pre-render. And then for Flutter, and then you have for Framework 7, then the list goes on. Of course, also the application, there's some guidance for you on, at least by the default, what it should be. So yeah. Going back here. I'm nervous for this one, but I hope it builds correctly. But if not, I already have a backup that's already building. I can go to this one, and then while the static web apps is deploying, I'm going to show you the API. Again, you can bring your own API backend, but you have to do an upgrade. What else is here? I can do an upgrade so you can guys see it, but probably in another app. I'll try to deploy another app later. Yeah, because with this one, as you can see the unlink, you can't unlink it anymore. But of course, you can modify the YAML file to remove the API location. But from Azure portal, you can't unlink it. So as you can see, this is the get weather HTTP trigger. And of course, you can create multiple HTTP triggers here, event triggers, and everything, since that will be the dedicated Azure function for your static web apps. Custom domains, as I mentioned, you can add two for the free plan. You can add domain in Azure or other domain. And then 5 for the standard pricing plan. And then the environments later, I'm going to do a pull request. Then hopefully in Azure DevOps, it creates one. So I've tried it multiple times before. Yeah, again, for your custom identity, you have to upgrade your plan in order for this to be available. Same as with private endpoints, if you want to restrict the access of your application. And then again, the enterprise grade age, once you move to the standard plan, it's just a tick box and then it's done. Let's see if the application is now built. All right, so it's done building. So hopefully we see something. So at least the external API is working. That's to be expected. The user info is grabbing details from what? So 3000. Wait, let me check. That's fine. But the important part is the API. So let's see in the configuration. If it does not work here, I'll just manually add. And then add. All right. Save. Hopefully that does the trick. Yeah. So as you can see now, same as what we did locally when we build the static web apps. Instead of pulling it from its own Azure Function URL, it does a proxy to our own Azure Static Web Apps URL and then just uses the available endpoint. So I'm able to get this for our Azure Static Web Apps. What else? And then I'm gonna try to upgrade my hosting plan. So I'm just gonna do a quick refresh. And then I'm gonna do what's the changes I made here. Just a spacing. I'm gonna disregard that. And what I'll do is I'm gonna create a staging branch from production. So I'm just gonna create release, production, staging. And save that. And then I'm just gonna do some changes on the user service. Hopefully I can show you this actual demo of this one, but let's see this one first. So what I'll do is gonna do it like this. Get user details. Yeah. So I just modify the user details endpoint. I'm gonna publish this branch to AZ origin. Then we go back to Azure DevOps, go to pull request, and then we're gonna do a pull request to the production one, since this one is the one that we use for the build of static web apps. Don't delete this. Oh, my mistake. Should have not. Yeah, let me do that again. I'm just gonna edit something. Let's say this is staging. And staging text. Let's go back to pull request. And then I'm gonna do a pull request to the production. I'm just gonna create it and do nothing. All right. So let's see if the environment's being created for us. And then while we're waiting for that, I'm just gonna create another instance of this in GitHub. Oh, I'm just gonna also go to general settings and add password protection. So I'm just gonna write password 1245 1245. Okay. Should be at least 8 characters long and must contain capital letters, lowercase letters, symbols, keyword. It's not identical. Wait, let me write it in the notepad. Let's go back to environments. Oh, still not created the production one. Let's see. Let's create GitHub repo real quick. Should be pretty fast. so I can show you that feature as well. Just gonna write this public. I'm just gonna copy the existing application without the dist and Node.js. Now to git add, and commit. I'm gonna have to remove this one. Right, so I refresh this. Okay, so have the GitHub repo. Then, oh, forgot I'm gonna delete. Oh, yeah. I'm just gonna create a new one. Um, Static Web Apps. I'm just gonna make this paid, and then GitHub SWAT demo. Easy SWAT demo main. Let's say Angular. Gonna pull the for this one, I'm not gonna refer the API, so we can try to link the Node.js one instead. Let's see. For this one, I'm gonna try to do the Azure Active Directory authentication. So I'm just gonna add auth login AAD. So since I mentioned it has a built-in pre-configured authentication, I'm gonna consent. if I do /me, I should be able. Oh, yeah. It should be me. So let's see. I'm just gonna do this. Change. As you can see with me, we're able to grab the user details. And then let's go back to so this one is the GitHub. If I go to action, yeah, it's done building. Yeah, it's the staging. And then I'm just gonna directly edit this one. And create a new branch. So I'm not gonna merge it yet. Let's see the actions. It's building. So that's still loading. Let's see the environments. Yeah, let's wait for a couple minutes. Then let's go back to the DevOps one. For DevOps, the staging environment is still not showing up. So I'm just gonna complete this merge changes then. Yeah, so that's 2 changes complete. Yeah, so for the GitHub one, the pull request created a preview environment and it says it's ready. So let's now go to this one. If I can click it, let me just refresh. I can't click it. Let's see if the URL is added here or something. Hopefully it does. There's an iframe. Not mobile friendly. It says there's an iframe here. Let's remove that iframe. Now I can click it. So yeah, as you can see, the staging environment is um, has a different one, different URL than this one. So it just added this one and this, I guess. And then let's go back to the password protect. And after this, I think that I'm done with my talk. Let's see why the password. Yeah. So now the password take effect. So the staging environment now is at least protected with the password before we can access it. Yeah. So at least even though, because remember that I said all the pre-production environment are available in public, even though your repository is set in private. So that's one added extra layer that you can do. And then, yeah, using the auth me, I'm able to grab now the user details. I just haven't properly mapped it. So if I go here, so it's client principal, then user details. User details. And that should work. But I'm not gonna push that anymore to speed things up. Um, and then I'm gonna bring my own API just to show you how you can do that. So go back to API. Remember, this is now the GitHub. I made this a paid plan, standard paid plan. So I'm gonna link the web app, and then I can locate the AD account or the Node.js. I uploaded also the Node.js as a web app here. But yeah, that's it. I think there's some for this one. Yeah, I changed the URL. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for my topic. I hope I was able to demo majority of the steps for static web apps. Yeah, back to you, Jose.
Thank you so much. I think it was very informative. I have few questions for this session. Are you able to hear
Sure.
me? Am I audible?
Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Um, I just want to know that if it is possible for if it is possible to publish these static web apps using the ARM templates. So how would you do it in that way?
What template?
With ARM templates.
Oh, the Azure Resource Manager.
Yeah, that's right.
I haven't done that yet, but that's also doable. I've seen some resources that's doable with ARM as well.
Okay,
Yes, I mainly rely on the Azure portal for the creation of static web apps. But yeah, that's definitely doable.
okay, okay. And when you do the deployment of these Azure Static Web Apps, then Azure actually creates a unique ID for these applications that you called as tokens. So is it
Yeah.
possible that for some reason, for example, if your application is compromised or if you are deploying from a separate GitHub repository, are you able to reset those static IDs or tokens?
Yes. So if you go to Azure Static Web Apps, we're just gonna use this one as example, and then go to overview. You should be able to click this manage deployment token, and then you can copy this one. We can do, let's say for example, this should very pretty quick. I'm just gonna write a new pipeline. I'm gonna use Azure DevOps as example for this. Um, then I'm just gonna start their pipeline. And here I can show assistant and then static web apps. This is how I deploy my static web apps before when Azure DevOps wasn't fully supported.
Mhm.
So using this template, you can go, it's pretty much the same as what we have in Azure Portal. So you can paste here the token that we just copied,
Okay,
or you can go to the variables and then of course reference the variables here. And then all of these stuffs are pretty much the same. For example, this Angular app as what we did in Azure Portal. So the build commands, the application, all of these are pretty much the same. So you can do it here. And then you can even take advantage of Azure Key Vault
okay,
and yeah, grab the token from the Azure Key Vault instead of the variables here. So yeah, that's how you'll do it in Azure DevOps at least if you don't want to use the built-in way. But I'm guessing it should be pretty much the same for let's say GitLab and Bitbucket.
okay.
Yeah,
And, thank you very much, Jasleen. It was a very informative session, and thank you very much for your precious time. And I hope you will also join us in future. Um, Did you paste the link of your GitHub repository somewhere? It would be good
yeah.
if you can put the link in the chat window because then I can put them with the description of this video when I'm uploading it to the YouTube channel.
Sure, sure. I'm just lost with I'm lost with Zoom right now. I can only see this.
Okay, yeah,
I couldn't find the chat, but I'll send you the GitHub repo, or otherwise you can just go to slash Jezreel. Jazz slash Jazz Maghuyop, and then you can pretty much grab this one. Not this one because I'm gonna delete this later. But this one you can grab this, and then again, this will have three branches, which is the bare Angular, and then the merge Azure function, and then the fixes for production release. So
okay,
just yeah, and then I'm gonna also send you uh, by email if it's possible
sure, that would be
on
great.
how I find.
So I would say that again, thank you very much, Azri, and I will upload this video to the YouTube Microsoft Azure community channel, and afterwards it would be available for people to view, and you can also uh, put the URL in your profile, or you can share it with your colleagues. So thank you very much for today, and have a very nice weekend.
All right. Thank you, sir, for
Thank
having
you.
me. So it was a pleasure. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.